A disc of steel, spinning in the dark, sealed inside a vacuum, floating on magnets, touching nothing at all, no acid, no lithium, no flame, no chemical cell quietly dying inside a wall, just motion, stored, held, waiting. And here's the part they would rather you never sat down and thought about. A machine like this can take a jolt of electricity, turn it into spinning, and give it back to you years later, having lost almost nothing to friction, not because of some new miracle, because of a law of physics older than the steam engine, older than the light bulb, a wheel that does not want to stop. So if a spinning disk can store energy for decades with no toxic chemistry and almost nothing to wear out, why is the thing in your garage and on your phone a block of lithium that starts dying the day you buy it? Somebody made that choice for you. And it was a very profitable choice. Let me show you the wheel they stopped talking about. Think about what a battery actually is. It is a slow chemical fire you keep in a box. Every charge, every discharge, the chemistry phrase a little. The lithium-ion pack in your phone is rated for maybe 500 to 1,000 full cycles before it noticeably fades. The big one in an electric car, a few thousand if you are gentle with it. Then the chemistry is spent, and the only cure is to throw the whole thing away and buy another. That is not an accident. That is the product. A battery is the perfect thing to sell because it is the perfect thing to sell twice, and then a third time it degrades on a schedule, it dies on a warranty, it needs cobalt dug out of the ground in places you would not want to look at too closely, and when it is finished, it becomes hazardous waste that almost nobody recycles properly. The global recycling rate for lithium-ion cells has been estimated at under 5% for years, and the cost lands on you. The replacement pack, the degraded range, the phone that will not last an afternoon by year 3, the home battery wall that loses capacity quietly year after year until the number on the app is a polite fiction. Now, hold that frustration in your hand for a second. The waste, the replacing, the toxic chemistry you are told is the future. And then picture the other thing, a wheel that just spins. Here is the turn. The thing I want you to actually understand tonight. It is called a flywheel, and in its modern form, it is one of the cleanest, longest-lived ways to store energy that human beings have ever built. The idea is almost insultingly simple. You take a heavy rotor, you spin it up to enormous speed using a motor. That motor is also a generator, so when you need the energy back, you let the spinning wheel drive it in reverse, and the motion pours back out as electricity. Spin it up to store, slow it down to spend. That is the whole secret. The energy is not hiding in a chemical reaction that can spoil, it is held in pure motion. Engineers call it kinetic energy, and there is a beautiful, brutal fact buried in the math. The energy stored in a spinning wheel goes up with the square of its speed. Double the speed, and you do not get twice the energy. You get 4 times. That is why the modern ones do not just spin fast. They spin at numbers that sound made up. So why don't they slow down and stop like a bicycle wheel does? 2 reasons, and this is where the genius lives. First, the air. A wheel spinning in open air fights the air the whole way around, and that drag bleeds the energy off as heat in minutes. So they take the air away, they seal the rotor inside a chamber and pump it down to a near vacuum. No air, almost no drag. Second, the bearings. A normal axle rubs, and rubbing is friction, and friction is theft. So in the best designs, the wheel does not touch anything. It floats. Magnetic bearings hold the rotor suspended in the middle of that vacuum, levitating on a cushion of magnetic force, spinning without contact. No air, no touch. A wheel turning in the dark, losing almost nothing. That is what the title means when it says forever, and I am going to be honest with you about that word, because honesty is the only thing I am selling here. It is not literally forever. There is still a whisper of loss, and I will tell you exactly how much later and exactly what these are good at and what they are bad at. But compared to a chemical battery rotting on a shelf, it is close enough to forever to terrify the people who sell you the rotting kind. Now let me take you back, because this wheel has a long memory. The flywheel is not new technology. It might be one of the oldest pieces of engineering we have. The potter's wheel, 4,000 years before the modern world, was a flywheel. You kick it once, and its mass keeps the spin smooth and even while your hands do the delicate work. The whole point was that the wheel stored your effort and handed it back in a steady stream. Then came the engine that built the modern world. When James Watt and his partner Matthew Boulton were perfecting the steam engine in the 1770s and 80s, the flywheel was the part that made it usable. A piston shoves in jerks, push, pause, push, pause. The heavy flywheel drank those jerks and turned them into smooth rotation that could drive a mill all day. Every factory of the Industrial Revolution leaned on a great spinning wheel of iron to even out its power. So the principle was never lost. What was lost, or rather what was buried, was the idea that the wheel itself could be the storehouse, that you could pour electricity in, spin a rotor up, and pull it back out later as clean power. And people did try. This is the part of the story almost nobody tells. In Switzerland, in the early 1950s, engineers at a company called Oerlikon built something they called the gyrobus, a real bus carrying real passengers with no overhead wires trailing behind it and no engine burning fuel. Instead, it carried a 1.5-ton steel flywheel under the floor. At each stop, an arm reached up to an electrical point and spun the wheel back up to around 3,000 revolutions per minute in a couple of minutes. Then it drove off, running entirely on stored spin for several kilometers before it needed another charge. The first line opened in Yverdon, Switzerland in 1953. There were gyrobus routes running in Belgium and in the Congo too. Let that sit. More than 70 years ago, a city bus ran on a spinning disc. No batteries, no exhaust. It did not survive, and the reasons matter because they are honest engineering reasons, not just villainy. The flywheels of that era were heavy steel, the vacuum and bearing technology was primitive, and a big chunk of the stored energy leaked away while the bus sat at a stop. The materials were not ready. The bus was ahead of its metallurgy, but the dream did not die in Switzerland. It moved into the most demanding workshop on Earth. Out at the NASA Glenn Research Center in Ohio, engineers spent years developing flywheels to replace chemical batteries on spacecraft. Their reasoning was pure and unsentimental. In orbit, a battery that dies is a catastrophe you cannot drive to the store and fix. They built and tested a unit they called the G2 flywheel, a carbon fiber rotor on magnetic bearings, and they spun it to around 41,000 revolutions per minute. They were seriously studying whether a wheel could replace the batteries on the International Space Station, doing double duty by storing solar energy and helping point the station at the same time. And at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, a physicist named Richard Post spent the 1990s championing what he called the electromechanical battery. A flywheel, he argued, built with modern composites and magnetic bearings, could store energy with a lifetime measured in decades and an efficiency that chemistry could only dream of. Post had already made his name designing magnetic systems for fusion research. He looked at the spinning wheel and saw, correctly, a battery with no chemistry to wear out. So we had the principle from antiquity, the smoothing genius from the Industrial Revolution, a working bus in the 1950s, NASA proving it in the hardest environment there is, a national laboratory physicist saying plainly that this could replace the chemical cell, and yet the thing in your pocket is still a slow chemical fire in a box. So who decided that and why? If you have made it this far, you already understand the spinning wheel better than almost anyone who will ever plug in a phone tonight. You understand that energy can be stored in motion, that a vacuum and a magnetic bearing can hold that motion for an astonishing length of time, and that this was demonstrated in public decades ago. If you want the rest of it, the full picture laid out plainly, every real-world system compared side by side, the honest numbers on cost and lifespan and round-trip efficiency, where flywheels genuinely beat batteries and where they absolutely do not, which storage actually makes sense for a home versus a grid, and the safety realities nobody markets to you. It is all gathered in the companion manual. That manual is the Cool House Codex, and alongside it, the Coolhouse Builds, and the Complete Coolhouse Field Edition. 3 volumes put together for exactly the person sitting where you are right now, wanting the unvarnished picture before making any real decision about energy. All 3 are available for $97, and the link is in the description below. It is the field guide I wish someone had handed me before I believed a single advertisement about the future of energy. Now, let me show you exactly why the wheel lost. It did not lose because it was worse. In its proper job, it is staggeringly good. It lost because of the shape of the business around it. Think about what a utility company and a battery maker actually want from a storage product. They want a recurring sale. The genius of the lithium-ion cell, from a balance sheet point of view, is that it expires, it has a finite number of cycles, and then it must be bought again. That is not a flaw in the product. That is the product's most valuable feature to the people selling it. Now look at a flywheel built for the grid. A company called Beacon Power built exactly that. In 2011, they switched on a flywheel plant in Steventown, New York, with 200 carbon fiber flywheels spinning in vacuum, each one rated around 100 kilowatts, the whole plant delivering 20 megawatts to help stabilize the electrical grid. Those flywheels were rated for something on the order of 100,000 full charge and discharge cycles and a service life north of 20 years with no degradation in capacity over that life and almost nothing toxic inside. 100,000 cycles. A lithium cell taps out in a few thousand. Read those 2 numbers next to each other and you understand the entire war. There is no money in a thing that lasts 20 years and never needs replacing. There is enormous money in a thing that dies on schedule. The flywheel is the appliance that will not break. And an appliance that will not break is a terrible business and a wonderful possession. And here is the cruel twist in the Beacon Power story, because I promised you real history and not a fairy tale. The United States Department of Energy backed Beacon Power with a loan guarantee of around $43 million to build that Steventown plant. The plant worked. The technology did exactly what it was supposed to do. But the company filed for bankruptcy in 2011, just days after the politically toxic collapse of a solar company called Solyndra had poisoned the entire idea of government-backed energy startups. Beacon got swept up in the blowback. The plant itself, the spinning wheels, kept running under new ownership. The technology never failed. The business did. That is the pattern over and over. The wheel works. The market around it is built to reward the thing that does not last. It was not beaten in a fair fight on physics. It was outspent, outmarketed, and undercut by the falling price of a chemistry that had $1 trillion supply chain pushing it forward. I want to be careful and fair here because this channel lives on telling you the truth. There is no secret cabal that locked the flywheel in a vault. There were real engineering limits in the early years. There was a genuine, dramatic collapse in the cost of lithium-ion that made batteries cheap enough to win most arguments. That part is real economics, not conspiracy. But the reason you were never even offered the choice, the reason the spinning wheel is invisible in the story you are told about your energy future, is that the people who profit from storage profit most from storage that expires. The most durable solution is the least sellable one. And so it sits in industrial plants and on satellites, out of your sight. Now let me earn your trust the hard way by telling you what the flywheel is bad at. Because anyone who only tells you the good half is selling you something. The flywheel has one real weakness, and it is the honest answer to that word forever. Even floating in a vacuum on magnetic bearings, a real flywheel does slowly lose its spin. The losses are tiny compared to air drag, but they are not zero. Residual gas, the magnetic bearing system itself, electrical losses, they all nibble. A high-quality grid flywheel might lose somewhere in the range of a few % of its stored energy per hour. That is astonishingly low, but it adds up over days. So here is the plain truth. A flywheel is a sprinter, not a hibernator. It is magnificent at storing energy for seconds, minutes, and a few hours, and at delivering enormous bursts of power instantly. That is exactly why the grid uses them to smooth out the second-by-second wobble between supply and demand. a job called frequency regulation, where they beat batteries because they can cycle endlessly without wearing out. But if you want to store summer sunshine to use in December, to hold energy still for months, the slow leak makes the flywheel the wrong tool. For that long, patient job, other methods win. A battery, for all its faults, holds its charge for weeks while sitting idle. The flywheel does not. So the honest framing is not flywheel versus battery, good versus evil. It is the right tool for the right span of time. And the scandal is simply that you were taught there was only one tool. Let me answer the questions I know you are already asking, because I have read the same forums you have. On the engineering threads, the ones where people actually build things, the verdict is remarkably consistent. One commenter on an energy engineering board put it about as cleanly as I have ever seen it. Flywheels, he said, are the best technology in the world for the job they are actually for, and people keep killing them by trying to use them for the one job they are bad at, long-term storage, and then declaring them a failure. That is exactly right. The wheel did not fail. The expectations were aimed at the wrong target. You are wondering, can I have one of these at home? And here I have to be very direct with you, because this is where excitement gets people hurt. A modern high-performance flywheel stores a tremendous amount of energy in a rotor spinning at tens of thousands of revolutions per minute. If that rotor fails, the energy does not leak out gently. It comes out all at once. This is why serious flywheels are encased in heavy steel containment housings and buried or bunkered exactly the way you would treat anything holding that much concentrated force. This is not a weekend garage project. A carbon fiber rotor spinning at 40,000 revolutions per minute is not a science fair build. And anyone who tells you to machine one in your shop is going to get someone killed. The high-speed flywheel is industrial and commercial equipment designed, balanced, and contained by engineers, and it should stay that way. There are companies now selling flywheel storage as finished, certified systems. A firm called Amber Kinetics, for example, builds steel rotor flywheels rated to deliver energy over a span of hours, designed as sealed, professionally installed units. If a flywheel ever lands in your home or your business, that is the form it will take. A certified, contained, professionally serviced appliance, not a kit. The right way to bring this technology into your life is to buy it built and warrantied, the same way you would never refine your own gasoline. So if you cannot safely build one, why does any of this matter to you tonight? Because knowing this changes how you read every promise you are sold about the future. When a company tells you the only path forward is a wall of chemistry that will degrade and need replacing on a schedule that happens to match their revenue targets, you now know that is a choice, not a law of nature. You know, there is a way to store energy in pure motion that can run for decades and shrug off 100,000 cycles. You know, NASA trusted it in orbit, and Switzerland ran buses on it before your parents were born. The wheel did not lose on merit. And you know what to ask for. When you look at grid storage in your region, at the projects, your utility funds, you can ask why the durable, non-toxic, endlessly cyclable option is missing from the conversation. You can recognize when someone shows you a storage plan, whether they have picked the Sprinter or the Hibernator, and whether they picked it for your benefit or for their reorder schedule. Let me give you the numbers to carry out the door, the ones worth memorizing. The energy in a spinning wheel rises with the square of its speed, which is why engineers chase rotational velocity above all else. The best modern grid flywheels reach somewhere between 16,000 and over 40,000 revolutions per minute, depending on the rotor. Round-trip efficiency, the share of energy you get back out compared to what you put in, lands in the range of 85 to roughly 90% for good systems, comparable to or better than many battery installations once you account for the battery's slow fade. Cycle life sits around 100,000 cycles or more against a few thousand for lithium. Service life, 20 years and beyond. Self-discharge, low per hour but real overdays, which fences it firmly into short and medium duration duty. And the materials, steel or carbon fiber, magnets, a vacuum chamber, contain nothing you would call hazardous waste. Hold those next to the chemical cell and the picture is plain. The flywheel is not magic and it is not a miracle. It is an honest, durable, narrow-purpose machine that does its real job better than almost anything else and was simply never the job the market wanted to sell you. Go back with me one last time to that bus in Iverdon in 1953. A driver pulls up to a stop, an arm rises and touches a contact. For 2 minutes, a great steel wheel beneath the floor spins faster and faster in the dark. Then the arm drops, and the bus pulls away, running silent on nothing but stored motion, carrying a load of ordinary people to work on the memory of a spin. No smoke, no battery to throw away. Just a wheel, doing what wheels have done since the potter's foot, holding our effort and giving it back. That bus was not a failure, it was a glimpse. The metallurgy caught up, the magnetic bearings arrived, the vacuum got better. NASA flew the idea. A national laboratory physicist named Richard Post wrote the math down plainly and called it a battery with no chemistry to die. Everything the dream needed eventually came true. The only thing that never arrived was permission for it to reach you, because the people who sell storage make their living on the kind that does not last. The knowledge was never lost, it was just never sold to you. Now you have it. The most powerful ideas in energy are not always the newest ones. Sometimes they are the oldest. A wheel that does not want to stop. So tell me where you are and what you actually need, because that one answer decides everything. Drop your situation in the comments. Are you trying to smooth out a few seconds and minutes of demand, the sprinter's job where a flywheel shines? Or are you trying to hold energy still for weeks and months, the hibernator's job where it is the wrong tool entirely? Tell me which, and tell me your region, and I will tell you straight whether the spinning wheel belongs anywhere near your problem. And if your town or your grandparents' town ever ran a trolley or a tram or one of those old flywheel buses, I genuinely want to hear it because those stories are vanishing. And before you take any company's word about the only possible future of storage, stop and ask the one question they hope you never ask. Who profits when the storage wears out, and who profits when it lasts? That single question will tell you more than a year of advertisements. If you believe that the most durable solutions keep getting quietly shelved because something that lasts 20 years and never breaks is a terrible business and a wonderful possession, then stay with me. Next, I am going to take you into the world of pumped water storage, the 100-year-old method that quietly holds more of the world's stored energy than every battery on Earth combined. And the reason you have probably never heard its name, there is more they decided you didn't need to know. The wheel is still spinning. They just turned out the lights so you wouldn't watch it turn. You stayed all the way to the end, and I'm grateful. I'm Eli, and inside the Forgotten Ways circle, I pick up right where I just stopped. The whole flywheel build. You can ask me your own question, and I answer you myself, not some machine. Folks like you are already in there with us. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen. Cancel anytime with one click.